The call came at 2:14 a.m. An ungodly hour typically reserved for the sorts of emergencies I had become all too familiar with during my tenure as a member of the NASA Special Operations Response Team. Most nights, such disturbances in sleep are met with dismay. But this was different. This was worse. Kerrigan, the voice on the other end, sounded more exhausted than alarmed. It was Director Hayes, a man known for his steel composure. "Speak," I responded, sitting up in bed, aware this was no ordinary call. "It's Unit 15. It's come back." That was all he had to say for me to understand the gravity of the matter. Unit 15, an orbiter classified beyond top secret, its very existence unknown to even the most senior members of staff. It was designed to probe the outer limits of our solar system, venturing into zones we marked as PTA, potentially threatening activities. That it had come back, as Hayes put it, could mean only a cascade of bad possibilities. Location: locked above geostationary orbit over the Pacific. We've kept it off the civilian telescopy and satellite tracking. "And the entity?" I asked, my voice steady, but my pulse was already racing. "Not contained." That was Hayes's way of flicking the switch from concern to an outright emergency. I swung my legs off the bed, my mind already racing through the protocols. "We need you here, Kerrigan." I acknowledged and hung up before throwing on my gear. Dark, nondescript, efficient for movement. The drive to HQ was filled with pre-dawn darkness, roads empty, the city asleep, and oblivious to the nightmares lurking in orbit. In the briefing room, which was starkly lit and uncomfortably chilly, Hayes handed me a pad showing encrypted data and classified images captured from Unit 15. The photographs were grainy, indistinct, but what was depicted didn't need high-resolution clarity to unsettle. Even with the state-of-the-art digital fuzz obscuring details, the shapes and forms hinted at an unknown biological presence, structurally complex, unprecedented. "We think it latched onto Unit 15 during its tertiary survey of Europa's ice crust," Hayes explained, his finger pausing over an image that looked almost like a frozen explosion in time. "And however it survived the vacuum on its ride back is currently beyond us." "How long do we have?" I asked, considering not just the typical lead time for such missions, but also the unpredictable factor this entity introduced. "Less time than we'd like. It's showing signs of mobility and attempted communication intercepts. If it figures out how to move outside its current locked position." The implication was clear. A rogue, unidentifiable entity, proficient enough to commandeer or disrupt our technology, hovering directly above Earth. It was a catastrophic risk scenario. As I left the briefing room, geared up and making way toward the transport bay, I felt an unease tightening in my chest. A typical mission had clear objectives, identifiable threats I could see and strategize against. This was different. We were stepping into the dark with whatever came back with Unit 15, not just physically, but intellectually, biologically. I was part way through the hall when Karen, one of our communications analysts, caught up to me, her face pale, her eyes wide with the kind of fear you feel in your spine. "Kerrigan, the entity, it tried to communicate again. We're running analysis on the patterns, but from preliminary looks." "What did it say, Karen?" I interrupted, impatient, feeling that tightness in my chest clench tighter. We don't understand all of it yet. But it knows about Earth, Kerrigan. It named us." Chilled to the core, but with resolve hardening within me, I nodded. This wasn't just a containment operation now. It was personal. It was protective. I stepped into the transport, the craft humming to life around me as the pre-dawn sky began to brighten, unaware below of the shuddering implications hovering silently in space above. The journey to the launch site was quick, automated, clinical. But my mind was ablaze, an entity knowing Earth, able to attach to a NASA orbiter, now free and thinking. What were we truly up against? As the spacecraft prepped for immediate dispatch to intercept Unit 15 and its unwelcome guest, Hayes's final words over the comm line echoed solemnly in my mind. "Contain it, Kerrigan, whatever it takes." I stared into the blackness of pre-launch space, then closed my eyes briefly. Duty was calling, but against what I had yet to fully understand. The silence of the pre-launch prep room was a stark contrast to the storm that was undoubtedly brewing in orbit. Each instrument check was a meticulous ritual, each led a silent sentinel. My crew was efficient, expressions taut with the restraint of their professionalism. They knew as much as I did, perhaps less. The cockpit embraced me like an old, somber friend as I strapped in. Sensor pads adhering to my suit's T. Reeds, every breath I took felt heavy, laden with the urgency of the mission. As the engines warmed up, a low, haunting hum permeated the cabin, syncing disconcertingly with the pulse I felt thudding in my throat. "Systems green. Launch in T-5, came the voice from Mission Control. It was clinical, devoid of the tension that gripped my chest. But then, an interruption, static over the comm, a crackling that fractured the routine updates. "Kerrigan, do you hear it?" It was Karen's voice, strained through the interference, almost lost amid the crescendo of the pre-launch sequence. I keyed the response button, my response terse under the strain of my focus. "I hear it, Karen. Keep tracking. Anything new, you break in, clear." "Clear," she replied, her voice almost swallowed by another burst of static that seemed unnaturally rhythmic. As the countdown concluded, and we were thrust into the clutch of gravity's fierce rebuttal, my mind was racing not just with the physical assault of the launch, but with the implications of Karen's interjection. Hear it? The entity had tried to communicate before, and now its attempts were piercing even the thick shields and heavy static of our launch protocols. The ascent was a blur of G-forces and concentrated navigation. Once in orbit, the spectacle of Earth below was a fleeting comfort, a reminder of what we were protecting, of what could be lost. I switched over to manual control as we approached the coordinates of Unit 15's hover, the silence of space swallowing the last echoes of earthly noise, leaving only the haunting memory of static-filled communications. There it was, Unit 15, seemingly dormant against the cosmos's vast tableau. But appearances in space deceive. I had learned that much. The entity was there, invisible to the eye, but its presence felt, exerting a pressure that was more psychological than physical. "Approaching target," I reported back to base, my voice steady despite the surreal terror budding in my stomach. As we drew closer, every sensor on our ship began to register anomalies, temperature fluctuations, erratic magnetic fields, and unexplained shifts in radiation. "Reading signs of life," my tech officer announced, his tone betraying his bewilderment over data that should not have been possible. "Life," I echoed, knowing the impossibility of such a statement in this void. But then, wasn't that the hallmark of our unwelcome stowaway, defined by impossibility? As if in response to our discovery, a pattern of light erupted from Unit 15, not random but specific, structured almost, communicative. It wasn't light as much as it was absence of darkness, a void within a void playing out a message in a syntax we were scrambling to interpret. It was mesmerizing, terrifying, a dance of shadows and revelations. And in that moment, the mission changed. It was no longer about containment or control. It was about understanding, communicating perhaps. The crew looked to me, awaiting orders that should follow procedure, yet called for an improvisation no protocol could anticipate. "Engage visual recorders, all channels. Let's capture everything. And may God help us," I commanded, my voice a mix of dread and command. The lights, or their absence, coalesced into a more distinct pattern now, undeniably intentional. The entity knew we were here, watching, listening. It was revealing itself by choice, not by our scientific imposition. Kerrigan, Karen's voice crackled through again, urgent. The patterns they're repeating. It's the same sequencing used in ancient navigational charts. It's a map. A map. My heart skipped at the revelation. Keep me updated on any changes, Karen. This conversation isn't one-sided, I said, a newfound resolve stealing my nerves. The entity was reaching out, across the void of space and the chasm of the unknown. And as the stars looked down on us, indifferent to the brave and frightened few huddled in a tin can far from home, we reached back. The stars' indifference was a cold comfort as we grappled with the entity's unfathomable communication. The pattern of absence continued to pulse, each beat a throb in the cosmos that defied human understanding. It was no longer just a map, it was an invitation, or so it seemed. Our vessel, a fragile shell of humanity's ambition, drifted closer to Unit 15 under my steady but wary command. Visualization is holding stable, but the data, it's beyond our algorithms, my tech officer reported, his voice a mix of awe and apprehension. The screens flickered with the enigmatic signals, their source invisible but undeniably present. Even the most cynical among us felt the shift, the plunge into a narrative we were unprepared to write but desperate to read. Manual adjustments to the interpretative models. Start with historical cipher techniques. Cross-reference with the navigational sequences Karen mentioned, I directed, each order punctuated with the silent hope O. F piercing the veil of the unknown. As we labored over the data, the ship itself seemed to acknowledge the gravity of our encounter. The humming of the mechanics, once a comforting sign of life, now resonated with each signal from the entity, as if in harmony or perhaps subservience. It unnerved me, the thought that not only our minds, but our very means of survival might be drawn into the entity's sphere of influence. Captain Kerrigan, Karen's voice broke through, no longer just crackled but clear, urgent. Look outside, now. I turned to the observation panel, my breath caught tightly within my chest. There, spanning the distance between our craft and the void that held Unit 15, was a bridge of shimmering nothingness. It was as if space itself had been sculpted, molded into a path that led directly to the heart of our mission, to the entity that defied reality. It's forming a connection, a literal one, said Karen, her tone a mix of scientific fascination and underlying fear. It's stabilizing the environment around Unit 15, compensating for the void. The path is safe, theoretically. The crew looked to me, their faces etched with the same mix of terror and wonder that I felt clamping down on my own soul. Taking this path could mean a breakthrough, a chance to meet this incomprehensible intelligence on terms we could scarcely dream of. Or it could be a meticulously laid trap, an invitation to our own demise. With each passing second, the shimmering bridge solidified, its invitation hanging in the stark, silent expanse between decision and action. Prepare the tether lines and suit up, I finally commanded, my voice steady. We're going to accept this invitation, but we proceed with absolute caution, lifelines attached at all times, constant communication. If anything feels wrong, we pull back immediately. The preparations were a blur of activity, each action underscored by the surreal reality of our task. We were about to step onto a path created by an entity whose existence alone challenged our understanding of the universe. As my crew and I secured our suits and checked each other's equipment, the weight of our journey pressed heavily upon us. We were stepping across the threshold of the known world, reaching out towards a being that had, until now, communicated in pulses and patterns that felt both alien and eerily familiar. With a final check, we ventured out, the stars silent witnesses to our descent. Each step on the shimmering bridge reverberated with unspoken questions. What will we find at its end? Understanding, communion, knowledge, or something far darker? As we moved, the entity's signals grew stronger, more insistent. A sequence that had seemed random was now clearly a welcoming rhythm, as if each beat of light and absence thereof ushered us closer into the entity's unfathomable embrace. The bridge ended abruptly before Unit 15, the vessel floating eerily in the manipulated void. We approached the hatch, the usual methods of entry irrelevant in this altered state of reality. "Ready to breach," I announced, my voice bouncing slightly off the helmet, my crew nodding their silent agreement. With a collective breath held between us and the void, the hatch opened not to our touch, but of its own volition, or perhaps by the entity's unseen hand. Inside, the shadows danced away from the lights we carried, retreating but beckoning, leading us deeper into the heart of Unit 15, and perhaps into the heart of the cosmos's greatest mystery. The abyss within called to us, its secrets veiled by darkness and the entity's cryptic allure. As we crossed the final boundary into Unit 15, the true nature of the map and our role within it began to terrifyingly unfold. The corridor of Unit 15 yawned before us, its walls lined with a scaffolding of shadows that seemed to shift imperceptibly as if breathing. The absence of gravity had always been our normal in space, but here it felt more pronounced, a palpable emptiness that tugged at the very essence of our being. The entity, whatever its true form, seemed at once bound to this vessel and wholly apart from it, an amalgam of reality and the unimaginable. In the semi-darkness, our headlamps cast beams that seemed to be swallowed almost immediately, consumed by a darkness that felt thick, alive. My heart pounded in my chest as if trying to escape the oppressive, unseen watchfulness that enveloped us. All my life, I yearned for the stars, the secrets they held. Now, faced with a secret so vast, that yearning weighted me like a chain to the cold floor of an ocean. Karen, always the most composed amongst us, floated slightly ahead, her body tense. The map we saw, it wasn't just a physical location. It calls us to something beyond our understanding, she murmured, her voice a thread in the vast silence that pressed in on us from all sides. The signal, once erratic and mystifying, had settled into a steady pulse as we penetrated the core of Unit 15. It was like the heartbeat of a great beast, resonant and deep, a sound felt rather than heard. Somehow, it communicated intention, though how it did so or what it intended, I could not divine. Are we being integrated into its narrative? Whispered Lou, our communications specialist. His question, born of fear and wonder, mirrored my own thoughts. The entity wasn't simply contacting us, it was weaving us into its very fabric, an act that felt simultaneously invasive and incredible. We found ourselves before what appeared to be a control room, or at least the closest analogy our minds could muster. The interfaces, if they could be called such, were configurations of light and shadow, shifting gently. My hands hovered over what seemed to be a console, fingers trembling with the audacity of what I was about to attempt. Touching it, the surfaces were both there and not there, my senses baffled by the contradictory information they relayed. Captain, the readings are. They're off any scale we have. It's rewriting its data. No, it's rewriting our devices to accommodate new data, reported Jenna, our engineer, her voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. The readouts on her screen morphed, danced, and formed new algorithms that shone with an otherworldly light. Our role was not merely as observers, we were components, entangled in an uncharted experiment of cosmic proportions. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. We had to maintain some semblance of control, some line to tether back to our reality and mission. Everyone, stay sharp. We engage with this, learn what we can, but at the first sign of danger to our physical or mental integrity, we retreat. As I affirmed our course, the ship, or the entity, responded. The pulsing quickened, and a new path of light extended from the room, beckoning us further. The corridor it illuminated twisted in geometry that defied Euclidean principles, angles glaring improbably as if space itself had been folded into a puzzle only the entity knew how to solve. The team moved on, each step a decision, each breath a choice. At the corridor's end, a chamber opened, spherical and lined with a fibrous structure that pulsed with soft, bioluminescent light. In its center, suspended and seemingly unmoving, was what could only be described as a node, a nexus of energy and darkness, intertwining in an eternal, silent dance. "Is that it, the heart of the entity?" asked Karen, her face illuminated by the strange glow. Before I could respond, the chamber reacted. The fibrous walls contracted slightly, rhythmically, as if the chamber itself were breathing. And with each contraction, the darkness at the node thickened, then pulsed outward in an invisible wave that filled the room and flowed over us like water. We froze, instinctively bracing against an unknown onslaught that, paradoxically, felt both violating and inviting. Understanding dawned on me, heavy and horrifying. We were not just discoverers, we were catalysts. The entity didn't just want to be understood, it wanted to expand, to propagate through the vectors of our minds. "We need to pull back. Now," I ordered, the urgency of our retreat lending speed to our movements. As we hastily retraced our steps toward the hatch we had entered, the realization that we were part of something much larger than our own expedition echoed in my mind. A chilling cadence that followed us as we fled the dark heart of Unit 15.